I think we should start. We've lost Kathryn.
Okay.
Kathryn, hiya. Okay, we're now going to start the meeting. Can I just tell everybody that we do record the ERSA forums? So by joining, you're giving consent for your participation in the meeting to be recorded. Good morning, everybody. We seem to have 13 people and we had over 50 registered. But what we've found is that occasionally people do join late. Some people watch the recording later. So let's make a start with those of you that we have. You'll be aware that over the last couple of months, ERSA have put out a call for a chair for Employment Support Wales. The model we're using in 2021 is that we have, rather than a chair and a vice chair, we are having 2 co-chairs. So to further explain where we're up to, Kathryn Jellings of 3SC has been appointed as the first chair for Employment Support Wales, but we are still going to put out another call for a co-chair later this week. So we've got sort of a 2/3 agenda items this morning. We might not take the full 2 hours, but at the end of the meeting, we'd really like some input in the chat about 2 things: how frequently you want to meet and future meetings. And we are thinking that we will meet again after the budget, but then we will schedule throughout 2021. So we'll have a definite schedule of events. So I didn't introduce myself. That was very rude. I'm Elizabeth Taylor. I'm the Chief Executive of ERSA, and I'm going to hand over to Kathryn now to chair. I'll just finish with the ERSA ground rules. Because some people struggle with the internet and bandwidth, we'll ask you to keep your cameras off unless you're speaking. Maybe at the end, if there's still only a small group, we'll try everybody opening up the cameras because that's much friendlier. Obviously, you can raise a hand, use the chat. Myself and my colleague Callum Carson will be on the meeting all the time, so we can do the support with the IT. Okay, so over to you, Kathryn.
Well, good morning, everyone. And yeah, it was a bit of a surprise this morning, but I'm very pleased to be appointed as one of the co-chairs of this forum, and I hope that everyone's going to find it really useful. So as Elizabeth mentioned, we've got a couple of things on the agenda this morning. I believe we've got Helen, who's going to take us through some slides around the labour market and current situation in Wales. And then we'll also be joined by WCVA, who are going to talk to us about the UK SPF fund. And then at the end, as Elizabeth said, we'd like some discussion around meeting frequency, what you hope to get out of this forum, etc. So, Helen, are you ready?
It's Callum.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was...
That's okay.
Sorry, Callum. There we are. There's this first schoolboy error. For some reason, I thought it was Helen. Callum, I do apologise. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. I'll just get my slides up here. Okay, so can you all see that?
Yep.
Yes.
That's great. So good morning, everyone. As Elizabeth said, my name's Callum. I'm the Labour Market and Policy Officer here at ERSA. And this morning, I'm just going to kind of briefly look at the current status of the labour market and the policy landscape in Wales as it pertains to the employability sector, and then kind of take a quick look forward at ongoing developments that may affect both the economic recovery and have an impact on the employment support sector in Wales. So the latest ONS figures published on the 26th January last month, that provided information from September 2020 to November 2020, pulled from the Labour Force Survey, and that showed for this period the unemployment rate for people aged over 16 in Wales was 4.6%, which was compared to 3.8% in the previous quarter. This is an increase of 14,000 people, up to 71,000. And the unemployment rate in Wales at present is 4.6%, which is lower than England's of 5.2%, but higher than both Scotland and Northern Ireland at 4.4% and 3.2%, respectively. So you can see there the kind of current status. This is all against the current UK average of 5.2%, which went over 5% for the first time since 2016 last year with the pandemic. Generally, Wales enjoys lower unemployment rates than other countries within the UK, but obviously these have expanded greatly since March last year. And between August and October last year, Wales also experienced the steepest rise in unemployment of any nation or region of the UK. Young people in Wales have also borne the brunt and the heavy lifting of the crisis. Young people are more than twice as likely to lose their jobs compared with older workers, as seen in the recent report by the Institute for Employment Studies, which I'll send a link around for after the meeting. And in terms of regional unemployment rates within Wales, in the latest figures, Swansea West had the highest rate at 7.8%, and Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire the lowest rate at 0.9%. In terms of the claimant count, the latest ONS data published in December shows that the count in Wales went up from 58,576 in March of 2020 to 112,577 at the end of 2020, which is a slight decrease from 113,222 in November 2020. So you can see there the peak was really towards the middle of last year. In terms of the job retention scheme in Wales, the latest HMRC stats show that 123,000 jobs in Wales have been furloughed as of the end of last year, which is down from 265,000 in July. The data at local authority level shows the take-up rate of furloughed employment is highest in Conwy, Gwynedd and Pembrokeshire, and is lowest in Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly and Wrexham. Practiced saying some of those names. The average monthly wages in Wales have also seen a sharp rise, which suggests that a lot of low-paying jobs, kind of in retail and hospitality and other sectors, that have suffered a lot. A lot of jobs have been lost there, which is obviously particularly concerning for young people. Many experts are concerned, like the Bevan Foundation, that the true unemployment rate is higher than is currently being reported in Wales and within the UK, and that young people have been hit particularly hard by the economic fallout of the pandemic. Yeah, so both within Wales and across Britain, young people have experienced worse labour market outcomes, not in terms of both job losses, not working, being furloughed, and earning losses. Those aged over 65, as I said earlier, were more than twice as likely to lose their jobs. According to a recent analysis by the Resolution Foundation, labour market losses are also more pronounced for women, the self-employed, and those who grow up in a poor family. There are obvious growing concerns about the longer-term economic and education scarring effects for under 25s from COVID-19, something we're looking at a lot at ERSA. And there are increasing calls for more public policy measures to better support young people in finding work, both right now and in the future as we recover from the pandemic. For example, for a job guarantee, which is one we see quite a lot. So you can see there the kind of scale of the challenge. In terms of the immediate and the further future economic recovery prospects, obviously unemployment figures are expected to jump quite dramatically after April the 30th when the furlough scheme is ended. The Bank of England's most recent monetary policy report argues that unemployment is likely to rise post-furlough, projecting that it will rise to 5.7% by the beginning of 2022, but be back down to 4.5% by 2024. But there's a lot of growing pressure for an extension of the furlough scheme. The British Chambers of Commerce and the TUC have in particular called for it to be extended until July at the earliest. It still remains to be seen whether this will come to pass. I'd imagine we'll get some news about that in the budget on the 3rd of March. The Bank of England has projected that GDP will pick up over 2021 as restrictions are hopefully eased and confidence picks up, though growth will also slow down again in subsequent years. There are also particular hopes that pent-up demand may lead to a dramatic uptick in the recovery of the hospitality and retail sectors, which could help with young people's unemployment issues, but this also remains to be seen, as does what the true economic fallout of Brexit will be. With regards to the policy landscape at present, the restart scheme is still currently under develop, which gives universal credit claimants who've been out of work for at least 12 months enhanced support to find jobs in their local area. The commercial process commenced at the end of last year, with the DWP expecting contracts to be formally awarded this spring, and then the scheme to go live in Wales and England this summer. There was a joint ERSA/IEP seminar led by Tony Wilson last month, which gave an excellent briefing on Restart as it currently stands. It covers the design of the programme, the commissioning and funding model, how bids will be assessed, and what works in employment programme delivery. So I'll send a link round to that as well, including a link to Tony's slides after this meeting. Jobs Growth Wales is also already in place, run by the Welsh Government for 16 to 24-year-olds, among other support. The Kickstart scheme has been introduced alongside this, obviously providing funding to employers to create jobs placements for 16 to 24-year-olds on universal credit. And finally, the JET scheme has been live in Wales since the 5th of October, targeting those who've been out of work for 3 months and supporting them to learn new skills, build the CV, etc. In terms of the forthcoming policy landscape, you'll all be aware of the recent changes to Kickstart, and it remains to be seen what will happen next with these and whether any further changes will also occur. But ERSA will continue to keep a close eye on monitoring any more potential changes and continue to communicate the sector's concerns to the relevant audiences across the country. The UK budget on the 3rd of March will most likely have the most significant impact on both the labour market in Wales and the policy landscape, particularly if the furlough scheme is extended. And we'll likely be convening a special session to discuss the budget's implications after that. We're also all waiting for more information on the specifics of what will happen with the replacement of the European Social Fund with the UK Shared Prosperity Fund scheme, something that we're keeping a close eye on, and Elizabeth is in particular. And then regardless of what happens over the next few weeks and months, we'll continue to ensure that ERSA facilitates forums like this to give everyone a chance to talk about it more and to raise issues and concerns that we can communicate to the relevant audiences. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Callum. Has anyone got any questions or comments or anything to add? No. Elizabeth, you've got your hand up there. Gareth Snaith, you got your hand up?
I have to switch the camera and stuff on now, don't I? I'll look here. Yeah, I think, obviously we're talking about a national response to an unprecedented global pandemic, and that there's a huge amount of different political factors to consider. We're looking at not just growing independence movements, but we're looking at different approaches being taken by the respective devolved governments. But I don't think it's necessarily all bad. We're fortunate to have such a strong voice with yourselves at ERSA. But I really think that it's up to all of us to, at every level, not just through ERSA, to cooperate in a more meaningful way. So really, there's a temptation to compete when things get tougher. But that's not going to be the way to having a healthy sector and a healthy society and communities in the future. The way to having a more prosperous society is to cooperate, and that's really, it's not so much of a question, more of a statement, isn't it?
That's a good statement.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gareth. Elizabeth, you've got your hand up there. Did you want to add something? No, not to, you're on mute at the moment, if in case you're talking. Okay, anyone else want to add anything, or happy to move on at this point? Okay, I'll take that as happy to move on then. So I'm delighted that next we're going to be joined by Janine Downing from WCVA. And Janine is going to, hello, I can see you now, that's great. Janine is going to chat to us about the UK SPF Fund. And so take it away. Thank you, Janine.
No pressure there then. Right, okay. I would turn my camera on just so I could say hello to people and you could kind of put a face to my name, but I am going to turn my camera off now. I'm hoping you can see my presentation and that you can hear me all right. If anyone wants to just let me know that you can see that.
Yes,
Can
we
see
can.
it, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So yeah, my name's Janine Downing and I'm the operational manager of the Third Sector European team within WCVA. So the Third Sector European team receives funding directly from WEFO, the Welsh European Funding Office, to support the third sector in accessing and delivering the current European funded programmes. So this presentation, it is going to talk about SPF, but I just wanted to give some context because I wasn't sure who was going to be in the room and your knowledge of the third sector and the role we've played in employability provision in Wales over the last few years. So I will come on to SPF, but I did just want to provide some context. So in Wales, I've given you some figures here of, how many third sector organisations are actually based in Wales. And the definition of the third sector in Wales isn't solely limited to charities. It includes quite a diverse range of organisations, including, but not exclusively, those listed on the screen. They range in size and areas of interest and geographical coverage. And in addition to some of these, there's also, it's estimated there's another 1,000 organisations based outside of Wales that are carrying out some kind of activity in Wales. So in addition to actually providing activity across a number of key areas, the third sector in Wales also accounts for just over 8% of the employment in Wales. We do believe that this is a bit of an underestimation, as it doesn't include people that work from home pre-COVID. Obviously, lots of us are working from home at the moment, and it also doesn't include those who are self-employed, and a lot of people in the sector are self-employed. One of the main areas of work that actually provide employment opportunities within the sector is under the health and social care banner, which is seen as one of the key parts of Wales's foundational economy. I've just also provided you some information there around the volunteering opportunities that the sector provides in addition to the actual employment opportunities. In Wales, we do have an infrastructure, the third sector infrastructure, and that's made up of 19 county voluntary councils from across Wales. They cover every local authority across Wales, and us as WCVA, who are the national support body for the third sector organisations in Wales. Each of us is an organisation in our own right, but we collaborate on a number of core activities to help strengthen the third sector and volunteering in Wales. So the network as a whole has almost, I think it's around 8,500 members across Wales. We also coordinate as WCVA the Third Sector Partnership Council, and that provides representation across 26 different categories of third sector interest. It provides a further support structure for third sector organisations in Wales. The areas of representation have a clear link across the portfolio of Welsh Government ministers, and it allows us as the sector to directly engage with the ministers responsible for those areas. The areas include things like advice and advocacy, children and families, community, education and training, employment, health, social care, wellbeing and housing, amongst others. So the third sector in employability, we've been involved as a sector across a number of different employability programmes over the years, and it's allowed us to develop an understanding of the landscape, both from a policy point of view, but also from an operational point of view. The third sector were key deliverers in the Future Jobs Fund when we had that in Wales, and have also delivered through Jobs Growth Wales. Many organisations from across the sector engaged through the JCP framework directly to support some of the mainstream delivery. WCVA have also been acting as a gateway organisation for the third sector in accessing the Kickstart programme. While we know that employability provision in Wales hasn't just been delivered through European programme, through European programmes. It has been a key driver due to the natural links of the priorities of the funding. The third sector in Wales is an equal partner in the design and delivery of EU funding in Wales. And I think that's a really key point to remember, that we have a partnership principle that we work to, and the third sector has an equal footing around the table with the other sectors in Wales. So we hold a couple of places on the Programme Monitoring Committee for European funding in Wales. We're obviously still in the current programme of funding, but just to give you some context, I provided some of the figures from the previous and also the current rounds of European funding. In the current programme, we've got there's around about 10 third sector led projects providing activities through ESF delivery, which either support people into employment or increase employability and employment progression. And also in supporting businesses to create new jobs. So the projects themselves are worth in excess of £100 million. And the third sector also delivers activities in the supply chain through other non-third sector led government projects. Some of those are local authority led, some of them are Welsh government led. This was just to give you an overview of some of the organisations who are leading third sector European funded projects in Wales. So I won't go through all of them, but this is just to give you an idea of who they are. The Cyffwrdd Cymru project is actually a Welsh government-led project, but it's delivered solely by the third sector. It's a really, really successful programme, and that supports people who have substance misuse or mental health conditions to gain the necessary skills to move on to employment. But it's done completely through the provision of providing peer support mentors, so that the people providing the support have already been through that journey, and they're kind of expert in supporting the people that need the help right now in moving on towards the future. But yeah, as you can see, there's a few different projects here, all with slightly different focuses, but they're all third sector led projects. We've also got the Active Inclusion Fund in Wales, which is delivered through WCVA. At the moment, we've funded round about 376 third sector organisations through the fund. The fund itself runs into 2023. And what's slightly different about this fund is WCVA don't actually deliver any activity. We help other organisations, other third sector organisations across Wales in actually accessing the European funding. So some of the projects can be quite small. They might only be worth 20,000, working with a smaller number of people. But what the structure of the fund allows organisations to do is use their expertise in actually working with those participants in the geographical areas that they're expert in. It's not prescriptive. So we've seen activities being delivered in lots and lots of different ways through sports and football clubs, retail, childcare settings, construction, outdoor activity, the list goes on and on. I did have a quick look at the participant list as people were joining, and I think there are a couple of people in the meeting here today who have either previously delivered this kind of activity or are actually still delivering. So obviously they'll be kind of experts around this. So then just to come on to Shared Prosperity Fund, you know, I don't think I'm going to say anything here that people aren't kind of already aware of. I haven't got any insider information to say, oh, this is how it's going to be delivered. But what I wanted to do was kind of give you an overview of the work that we're doing around this, to hopefully kind of be able to bring together some of the links that you also have to share the information, because I think the point that was it Gareth made earlier on about collaboration and not competing is key here. We're moving into quite a different landscape from what we've previously seen in this area, and I think being able to kind of have that collaborative relationship in Wales in the way that we work will be key in making this a success as we look at a wider UK picture. So just to give you kind of some of the history around this, I'm sure lots of you will already know that in Wales there was a lot of work done around creating a framework for regional investment. The Welsh Government consulted quite widely on this, and I personally was really pleased to see that the third sector submitted the highest number of responses to that consultation. Overall, we broadly supported the recommendations made within the framework plan. We did have some concerns around the complex governance framework of how that funding would actually be devolved at a regional level, and some questions around the use of corporate joint committees. But we felt that in Wales we have that positive relationship across all of the parties involved that would mean that we could work collaboratively and influence to ensure that the sector's voice was heard, and that, you know, we'd be able to work collaboratively for the benefit of our communities. We did some work with our sister councils across the nations, and with our sister council in Scotland and Northern Ireland, we produced a shared position statement on SPF, which was issued just before the spending review, not the comprehensive spending review. We were calling on the government to honour some of their promises around the devolved nations not receiving a penny less than what we'd previously had. And we also stated that we felt the funding should be used to address and reduce disparities in social and economic well-being within and between places and people, while fully integrating the principles of equality and state sustainability. And it also needed to be built on the partnership principle across the sectors. The other point that we made quite clearly in that is that the administration of any funding should be proportional and to the activity that was actually being delivered, and it should be as easy as possible to access. I think we don't need to go into lots of detail around the bureaucracy and the issues that people have in accessing the European funds as they currently stand. So we wanted to see the SPF address some of those issues. When it came to the spending review, I think initially we were pleasantly surprised in the proposed focus of the funds. We fully expected the spending review to focus on infrastructure spending. So when it came to the actual subject funding that the proposal was kind of looking at, we were pleasantly surprised. I think it's fair to say that's where some of our positivity ended. The lack of information on the governance of the proposed funding caused us and is continuing to cause us concern. The short-term nature of the initial pilots with no information of what they'll actually focus on or what happens when they end is obviously a concern. And then there's the increasing focus on this being a centrally controlled funding pot. I don't think these are issues we can work through, but I think across the board, it's the lack of information we are seeing on any of this, because, you know, we're expecting things to move quite quickly, and the lack of information out there makes it very, very hard to prepare. When it comes to the withdrawal agreement, obviously this is wider than just SPF. So within the actual withdrawal agreement, there is specific mention of structured civil society dialogue. And we're beginning to explore now how we can best use that with our engagement with UK government to be able to influence not just around SPF, but some of the wider issues around some of the trade agreements and how they impact on communities as well. We initially saw the specific focus of this within the withdrawal agreement as a really positive step. I think the more we're looking into this, the more we're beginning to see that the inclusion of this specific civil society dialogue isn't actually something that our own government pushed to include in that. It's something that the EU pushed to include it, and we have seen very, very similar wording in other trade agreements, such as the Canadian trade agreement. So it was kind of a push from the EU rather than a commitment from our own government, but it's still a really positive step because it is in there and it is something that we can try and push the UK government to engage with us on. We do have ongoing engagement with both Welsh Government and UK Government. Obviously, our engagement with Welsh Government is a lot, I wouldn't say more clear, but it's been going on for a long time. So it's a lot more established than our engagement with UK Government. But we do have regular roundtable discussions with the Secretary of State. SPF is usually mentioned, but it's not specific engagement on SPF, and we certainly, we're not getting any kind of specifics on the design of the fund. We do feel that from the language that is being used, it is the intention for the fund to be managed by local authorities, and that the Secretary of State has referred to it a number of times as being true devolution. He tends to use local authorities and local communities interchangeably in the way he kind of talks about it. So I think we need to understand a little bit more about what that means. We're still fully engaged through the Welsh stakeholder groups, including the European Advisory Group and the Regional Investment Steering Groups. And we've got regular contact with colleagues in Welsh Government to ensure that we're sharing any relevant information. So I think it's just trying to understand how we can use all of those different networks and contacts for best influence, really. So some of the things that we're looking at for the future. We're working with our sister councils from across the nations to look at how we can best use our collective influence. After this meeting, I've got another meeting with our sister councils on exactly this subject. That's trying to bring partners, not just the sister councils, but others with an interest in this area of work. It's trying to bring us all together to be able to share information, because there is so much going on out there and so many different groups coming together to discuss this. So just to try and share that information and get the voice not only of the sector, but the devolved nations and also the regions within England, because I think, we obviously in Wales, we're concentrating on us as a devolved nation, but there are specific areas in England who want to have a stronger voice in the future of this funding. So we're trying to kind of bring those voices together. The other thing that we're doing a lot of work on as part of my project is demonstrating the impact of the current funding programmes and clearly showing why this funding is needed, and trying to kind of demonstrate what will happen if this funding isn't there and if it isn't replaced. I think what we're beginning to see is the understanding of how the European programmes work to date within UK government is very England focused. And we know that the way European funding is used in England is quite different, and they haven't had the same success with it as we have here in Wales. So we really want to be able to demonstrate the success that we've had in the way that we work in Wales, and the real difference that we've made to our communities using this funding. We want to strengthen our relationships with partners. One that I've mentioned here is the Wales Civil Society Forum on Brexit. So WCBA do have a formal partnership with the Forum on Brexit currently, and we're hoping that this can continue. But I think what we need to use is, again, it's that collective influence of our expertise around the funds with the wider view that the Civil Society Forum on Brexit have on kind of all things Brexit. We need to kind of be able to engage more constructively across the board with UK government. So obviously SPF is part of that, but there are other issues that we need to get better at engaging with UK government on. Our previous focus has very much been around our relationships within Wales and in Brussels. And although those are still really, really important to us, we definitely need to expand our relationships on a UK level. Obviously, in Wales, we continue to engage with local authorities and WLGA to kind of make it clear that the sector are a key delivery partner currently, and we intend to be a key delivery partner in the future as well. And it's not just about engaging within the sector. We need to engage better with partners across Wales. So it's about bringing the sector together and helping possibly within our own sector get those voices that haven't been heard previously and haven't been seen as maybe key deliverers in this area before, to get their voices heard, but also to engage with wider partners across Wales to the benefit of our communities. The other thing that we're doing is we've got a good relationship with DWP, and we continue to speak to them, but I think we need to understand a little bit more about what their role in the proposal for SPF in the future will be. Obviously, we're seeing, the delivery of Kickstart, Restart and Jets. So we just need to understand what the role of DWP will be in the future of any delivery on SPF. So I think, I went backwards there. I think that's everything from me. I'm happy to take any questions. But I think more than anything, if people want to talk to us about, how they can get involved with some of this, how we can share information and better work together, I'm really open to all of those conversations. My contact details are here. So, please feel free to get in touch with me, and we can kind of chat off screen rather than here if you'd prefer. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Janine. That was really great. Really interesting. We'll throw the floor open for questions now. But just to kick us off, Janine, I was interested to understand what you think the biggest challenges to the implementation of the fund in Wales are.
To our sector or generally? To our sector.
Both, why not?
Okay, so I think the biggest challenges to the implementation initially is understanding the governance of it. So understanding, how we're going to get involved. I have quite a big fear around the possibility of this being quite short term in its funding. One of the benefits of European funding is that multi-annual commitment to funding, and I think particularly from the sector, we need that security in knowing that we have this funding for a set amount of time to be able to make a real difference in our communities. So yeah, I have concerns about how the actual funding package is going to work. I think one of the other things that will possibly cause a risk here in Wales is there's going to be a gap in funding. And we've seen it in previous programmes of European funding, and I have a fear around the loss of knowledge within our sector specifically, because obviously the sector can't sustain the jobs without the funding being there. The other implementation, I suppose the other concerns around implementation is how it's going to work. It's not that the funding being devolved to a local level is a bad thing. Of course that's not. But what we need to be able to do is to make sure that, I think when Gareth mentioned earlier about that collaborative working, it's that the people who can deliver the best activity for their communities are the people that are delivering. And it's not just that the funding is kind of kept behind closed doors to maintain kind of some of the mainstream provision and that kind of stuff. So I think, it's all of those kind of things, that there's just so little information out there at the moment. We can't understand how that's going to work yet. So yeah, they're just a couple of key things.
Fantastic. No, that's really, really insightful, really interesting. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Janine? I can't see any hands up. Feel free just to jump in. Oh, there we are. Gareth, I've got a hand from you.
I mean, I've been name checked a couple of times now, so I'm just going to build on my earlier success with saying something vaguely sensible, right? Westminster, politicians in general, really amusing habit of just completely ignoring us. You can say, make perfect sense, right? They'll do whatever they want because they've got rich donors giving them more money, and that's what they want. So how are we going to counter that as a sector, as a group, as a team, as a country? How do we counter that complete ignorance and ignorance of what we need?
I mean, that's a good point, because previously we've seen a lot of match funding from European social funds. So so yeah, kind of, will that be the case going forward, do you think?
Again, there's so little information out there. You know, we kind of, I think one of the problems that we're going to have when it comes to match funding is, obviously, like you say, the European social funds have matched funded a lot of Welsh Government core programmes. And I think that as ESF is kind of withdrawn, any spare funding that Welsh Government have are going to have to go into those kind of core programmes. I think the question about how we work with UK government, you know, it's so hard, because, you know, they, without getting too political, they are going to do things the way they want to do things, irrespective. And I think it's finding things that we can try and hold them to. So, you know, we're really trying to jump on this civil society dialogue within the trade agreement and say, okay, whether you wanted that in there or not, it's in there. You have to talk to us. Getting them to listen to us is a different thing. But I think it's about, you know, in Wales, I know there's not issues in Wales, but of course we're all coming from slightly different places. We all have slightly different views in the way we work. But I think in Wales we are so lucky to have the really positive working relationships that we do have, and we need to use those to our you know, to our benefit, and make the most of those. And regardless of what sector we're talking from, we need to have that collective voice and shout as loud as we can, and just keep banging the drum and holding the government kind of you know, against what they've said they'll do. So it's not going to be an easy job, I don't think. But I think, like Gareth said, we all have a responsibility in doing that.
I mean, sorry, just to add, I mean, obviously we're members of ERSA, we're supporters of yourself, and we might work together with everybody on the call in various different contracts. But is there a way that we can put some sort of structure in place whereby the things you're saying are not only amplified and supported by us in terms of our membership and our sort of tacit support behind the scenes, but in a very public way, some sort of a joined up or operational model of some sort, where when you say something, we all come out at the same time and go, we're on board with that, not just through membership and behind the scenes, but really publicly and openly, and something that's a little bit more visible in the public eye, as well as in sort of behind the closed doors where lobbyists are.
Yeah, you know, I think that could be a really positive thing, and I'd be more than happy to pick up that conversation with people if they're kind of interested in you know, bringing something together. What we're working on at the moment is we're obviously working with the other nations to try and have a collective voice as a sector across the nations. But that's complicated in its own right, because the sector is so different in each of the nations. But in Wales, what we want to do is kind of bring a group together that is, you know, that is able to have that Wales voice, that collective voice in this area. Obviously, I'm looking at it from a third sector point of view, but bringing others to that table isn't something that I'm opposed to. And I think, you know, if we can kind of do that, that would be a brilliant thing to be able to do.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So just to build on that, has anyone else got any questions first? I'll take that as a no. But as a final thought, Janine, obviously, as an employability sector, we have lots of third sector members and social enterprises and various other sort of social groups involved in the employability work. And I know you mentioned about needing evidence and building case studies and examples. Is there anything else that we as a sector maybe can do to support this agenda? A call to action, if you like. What do you want us to do?
You know, I think the case studies and the evidence is really key, and making that kind of case for future funding. But if there is something that we could kind of explore, you know, whether it's a link between whatever we're creating within the sector and this group, to kind of see whether, you know, if there's maybe joint statements we want to put out, or, you know, a collective response that we can kind of put out, that's great. I think the key here is information sharing. There's so little information coming out from where we want to see information coming out, but there's so much coming out around the sides. You know, it's about being able to collectively share that information. So, you know, if that group is able to kind of do that, that would be really useful.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and thanks for answering the questions as well. So I think the final agenda item that we've got today is an ERSA update from Elizabeth.
Hi. So just a few things. I'm losing my voice. We have a new website that we're just about to go live with, and it has a membership area that is sort of built for collaboration, and we will have a Wales section on that website. So beyond the launch, which we will ask members to see all the things that we can do between the website and a platform that we've acquired that's called ERSA Live, we will do something very specifically for Wales so that you can see how you can use that, because it is a resource for the sector to collaborate with each other. So watch that space in the coming weeks. I think the other thing just to say is, I'm sure you know all the future forums and things that we have planned, and the thought leadership sessions. Those get sent out in the weekly bulletin. But we will start doing, as we get further into the year, something perhaps every 2 months or every quarter that's very Wales specific. So please send us ideas for things that you'd want to see in an Employment Support Wales bulletin. And then my final thing really is around future agenda items. So the things that we within the office, from conversations with members in Wales, have got planned for the next meeting is to invite a speaker from the DWP and the Welsh Government to talk about future commissioning. We're also going to do a presentation about the existing landscape in Wales, which I'm sure those of you that are based there and work there know far more about than me. But also, as Restart is introduced and we see jets attached and all the other things that are going on, I think just getting somebody to give us that overview would be really useful. And then finally, we thought that we could do, some of you may be involved in our Kickstart community of good practice. We've got 472 organisations that are involved in Kickstart who attend the ERSA forums. But we want to do something that's really Wales specific. We want to look at the Kickstart development in Wales, to look at whether there are any gaps, if there's any gaps or challenges that ERSA can help you respond to, and also get some success stories, because I think we really need to be putting out all the good things that the employment support sector has been doing to make Kickstart work for young people. So those are the first things that we've got, but we're very open to suggestions. It's your forum. We just try to facilitate the process. So ideas of agenda items, ideas of speakers, anything you want to say, you can put it in the chat today. You can email events@ERSA, put Wales in the subject. And I think the final thing to say is, as we respond to COVID, we are intending that we do something every 6 weeks. So I hope that schedule is good for you. We will always put up to 2 hours in the diary, but like this morning, it may well only take an hour. I can see Janine's suggestion in the chat, and I'd love you to link me with those people. So please send those to myself. I'll share them with Callum and we'll reach out to them. So unless there's any more suggestions this morning, that's really it for the ERSA update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fab. Thanks very much. That's great. So the last thing is the frequency of these meetings. Anyone, any thoughts about how frequently you'd like these to take place? Elizabeth, do you know how frequently do other network meetings?
Yeah, well, we used to look at every 2 months, but I think at the moment, as there's a lot going to start happening as we get opened up again, as the vaccines, hopefully, we're out of restrictions and everything, we're wondering about doing it every 6 weeks. And if there's anything really relevant happens, like the next commissioning or whatever, we would slot something extra in. So unless people think that's too frequently, we'll go with 6 weeks. I think somebody's put something in the chat, but I don't know why I can't quite see it. Every 6 weeks, yeah, somebody's saying, let's go for that.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And we will put a schedule right through till the end of the year with dates. Okay.
Fantastic. So I think that's it for today then, everyone. Thanks very much to Elizabeth and to Callum and to Janine for doing their bits for us. Much appreciated, and we'll get some dates out to you now for the next few meetings, and look forward to seeing you all again.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Kathryn.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Let's get the co-chair and then have a very small group call with Laura as well, yeah?
Yeah, no, that'd be fab. And I'm
Great
sorry,
stuff.
Callum, that I thought you were called Helen.
It's me with my bad sinuses.
I don't know, not a very good line on my end. I think my house is like the black hole for reception, so probably my fault for crap reception. But there we go. But thanks very much, and yeah, look forward to catching up with you soon, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.